wakati huu anaangalia kutoka juu, akiangalia wana wa Kenya jinsi wanavyoteseka, jinsi wanavyotaabika, jinsi wanavyoshangaika. Anaona Jaramogi akisema, wana wa Kenya, simameni imara kama mimi nilivyosimama imara. Asema, wana wa Kenya, foeni bidii, simameni imara, vueni viatu, twende hata kama ni miba, tukanyage miba, tuelekee safari ya ukombozi. Mungu awabariki kila mmoja wenu.
Asante sana Mzee Omido. Now we want to go to the keynote address, which shall be delivered by three eminent persons, and I want them to come to the podium. Professor Nyang' Nyong'o, Professor Michael Chege, and Dr. Olara Otunu. As they come, there is a tribute by Ambassador Patrick Hayford, who was Ghana's High Commissioner to South Africa in the last 2 years of President Mandela's leadership, after which he became the Director for Africa in the Executive Office of United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan. He says that Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was a true African statesman and patriot, a giant of the anti-colonial struggle, and one of the founding fathers of modern Kenya. Today we commemorate and celebrate his courageous, steadfast commitment to upholding and preserving the essence of our identity, culture, and value as Africans. Everywhere he went, he made a lasting impact. Such was the sheer force of his personality. Oginga Odinga spoke boldly and loudly for Africa, locally, regionally, and internationally, becoming a powerful advocate for the freedom and dignity of the black man. We will always remember and commemorate his immeasurable contribution and his extraordinary legacy. May his great soul rest in perfect peace. Signed, Ambassador Patrick Hayford. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the stage in which we are going to have our keynote address in a unique way. And before us here, we have three great Africans. The first to speak will be Professor Nyang' Nyong'o, who for the moment is here now will remove his governor's hat and will wear his academic hat. He's not only been my mentor at the university in the Department of Political Science, but he's written a lot on politics and political economy, but he's also become a practitioner. And during the Ford days, he was the executive director of Ford and later Ford Kenya. And he was also one of the advisors of Jaramogi Odinga before he became a member of parliament and later became the senator of Kisumu and finally governor of Kisumu. Professor, I think you will start and then I will introduce Michael, or you want me to introduce all of you? Okay, the second speaker will be Professor Michael Chege. Professor Michael Chege and Professor Nyang' Nyong'o are like Siamese twins. They teach political economy, and during the heydays of the 1980s, when there used to be public lectures in the University of Nairobi's Taifa Hall, Professor Nyong'o and Professor Michael Chege were regular speakers. They've also been together when Professor Nyang' Nyong'o was the Minister for Economic Planning. Professor Michael Chege was his advisor. So you can talk of two gentlemen who are a loaded combination. Joining them is again one who combines very well with them. And Dr. Olara Otunu with Professor Nyong'o go way back to Makerere. He became the foreign minister and has been a diplomat of the Uganda government. He comes from the community of the wider Luo in Uganda. And Dr. Lara Otunu can give you the credentials of Jaramogi as a Pan-Africanist because he has a living memory of what Jaramogi was doing for the greater African nation. Now that I've introduced them, I would come in and they have a modern baton. Professor Nyong'o, you are first on the floor.
Thank you very much, my friend Adam, Prof. Thank you very much, the family Jaramogi who arranged these things today, inspired it, and all those who have come. Less than 5 years into flag independence, the doyen of social democracy, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, penned his autobiography, Not Yet Uhuru. Matters have since gotten worse. The masses in Kenya can hardly breathe. Across our land and nation, disrespect for human dignity reigns. There are families surviving on 1 meal per day. Healthcare for all remains a distant dream. Many parents cannot afford school fees. Place their hopes on charity. Kenya is now rated one of the most unequal societies globally, with an annual rate of growth that provides little hope that our nation will provide a place to feel at home for all our people. Just before independence, Jaramogi told the Nyapara of colonial rule, and I quote, "Kenya is Marwa," which means Kenya is ours. Perhaps he spoke too early, for it didn't take long before Fanon's Rachel of the Earth foresight on the pitfalls of independence without a truly progressive and nationalist ruling class was demonstrated as from one country to the other in Africa through military coups. The new and productive African ruling class, who are only interested in the power and the benefits of power, have continued to enrich themselves and not look after the plight of the poor, which is the major cause of state failure today. One of the things that Jaramogi was committed to liberate Africans from. A generation has found itself landless and homeless even 60 years after independence. Many still live as squatters in overcrowded former Mau Mau villages and informal settlements in Kenya. Jaramogi was earnest when he wrote his book, Not Yet Uhuru, boldly stating that, and I quote, "The struggle for independence is not just about freedom from colonialism, it's also about the struggle for economic, social, and political justice for all." He was categorical that the struggle for independence, I quote, was about improving the lives of all Kenyans. As long as there are downtrodden people in the nation of Kenya, the struggle for liberation in Kenya, as elsewhere in Africa, remains urgent and an imperative. That struggle is still urgent and imperative even today. Vice President Jaramogi Oginga Odinga witnessed it all. The scramble for post-colonial or colonial assets, the rapid transfer of public property to private hands, and the rise of an authoritarian presidential state. He saw individuals and some former nationalists troop to the seat of power in pursuit of special interests. He saw firsthand the seeds of present-day major graft planted and the disdain for the citizen displayed among the ruling class. This was not the Kenya Jaramogi had dreamt of. Certainly not. Without shame or sense of guilt, this class accumulated land at an alarming speed, driving poor peasants out of their ancestral homes when it suited them. Jaramogi faced constant intrigues in the ruling party KANU. To isolate all progressive forces, decided to finally resign from the government to form the Kenya People's Union in 1966. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was detained without trial, as you have heard, and the government mounted a witch hunt against all progressive forces. Jaramogi remained unbogable and continued the struggle for multi-party democracy, dignity and social justice up to his last breath. Exactly 30 years ago today, we fondly remember Jaramogi as steadfast, modest, honest, consistent, a diligent farmer, teacher, mentor, a Pan-Africanist, nationalist, a realist who was earnest in his advocacy for the liberation of the wretched of the earth in Kenya and elsewhere in the world. Koigi wa Wamwere got it right. He said Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was one of the few politicians whose politics was driven by ideology than personal whims, and by a vision that would have been a compass by which he would have led the ship of state had he been president of this country, unquote. To the disbelief of many, Jaramogi hung Kenyatta's portrait on the wall of his Kisumu home, together with portraits of great freedom fighters Nkrumah and Gabriel Abdel Nasser of Egypt. When asked why he would give Kenyatta this honor, he said, and I quote, he had no power to revise history and deny that Kenyatta fought and suffered for the freedom of Kenya. His honesty and respect for history was engraved on his walls, notwithstanding his differences with Jomo Kenyatta. Those of us who led the second liberation struggle have walked in the footsteps of Jaramogi, consistently working with his son Raila Amolo Odinga. Jaramogi lives on in the basic structure of our struggle. The Constitution respects and honors, and I quote, those who heroically struggle to bring freedom and justice to our land, unquote. Jaramogi's name and footprint is in it and remains indelible. Devolution, as enshrined in the 2010 Constitution, is a fruit of the second liberation. The preamble recognizes the aspirations of all Kenyans for a government based on the essential values of human rights, equality, freedom, democracy, social justice, and the rule of law. Values that Jaramogi espoused in his life, struggled for, and suffered for. And, as I have written elsewhere, that the annals of history, in the genesis and evolution of modern nations, only has a few visionary leaders who shaped the destiny of such nations at critical moments in history. In the case of Kenya, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga will always stand tall among the nationalists who shaped the destiny of our nation. 30 years on, it's still a long walk to freedom, but we shall get there. Long live Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Long live his vision and inspiration. Long live his words and advice. Noti Tuhuru, aluta continua. I will now hand it over to my colleague and comrade, Professor Michael Chege, with whom I have worked very closely since the 1960s, not just in academy, but also in politics as well. Michael.
Thanks very much, Peter. I would like to begin by expressing my appreciation to the Oginga Odinga family for accepting, for being generous and allowing us to come in and celebrate with you this anniversary of a great African, a great statesman, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Dr. Buru, thank you very much as a leader of family. My friend of many years, Prime Minister Odinga, again, always a pleasure to be with you and your family. Let me say this before I go far. I don't want to repeat what everybody has said about the greatness of this man. I want to say something about what we have done, which are not yet in the public domain, and which is people like us who should be doing research and bringing them to you as a way of getting him known better and also getting our country to improve the way it does its business better. I was 12 years old in 1958 when Jaramogi stood in Parliament, Legislative Council, and said whatever the British thought about the 14 members who had been elected in the Legislative Council, the true leaders of the African people are the ones you locked up. Jomo Kenyatta, the Kapenguria Six, and the others. I can assure you from my heart, from what I heard from the elders, because we are still in the village concentration camps, the earth shook. Nobody knew what was going to happen to him, whether he too was going to be locked up or what was going to happen. But I can tell you, it was a moment that raised people's hearts. Today, I want to use this position in my own small way to give back to that moment of happiness which an awful lot of young children in those villages felt as a result of Jaramogi. Not yet Uhuru has been mentioned. Recently, two major biographies this past year were published, not specifically about Jaramogi, but which mention him. I think if you can bring the two. Oh, here they are. One, it's about the life of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, as you all know, was one of the greatest leaders of the last century. An African American, he was there at independence in Ghana in 1957. He knew Jaramogi, he knew Tomboya, he knew this country. He followed each and every development that was going on. This is by far the most important book published so far. 680 pages, his big book on the life of Martin Luther King. You may not know that Jaramogi, and I'll say this a little later, provided the instruments of accession to Kenya to the United Nations in December 1964 as the representative of the President of the Republic of Kenya. Our membership of the UN, the signatory of that document is Jaramogi. This appears here because it was important. Jaramogi travels to Atlanta to speak to the Student Nonviolent Coordination Conference, and a song arose. I don't know this song, Jaramogi, Oginga, Odinga, Oginga, Odinga. Martin Luther King knows about this because Malcolm X was singing about this when he was talking about Mau Mau in Harlem. So you can see what we know and what you're hearing from here about Not Yet Uhuru is part of the story. Second book here is the book on Patrice Lumumba, by far the best there is now on the death and the murder of Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba was a person whose life near where he liked to live in Island. This book shows the CIA's mendacity in the murder of Patrice Lumumba, the way he was killed and thrown into an acid tank of hydrochloric acid in Katanga. Two things here which are important to Jaramogi's life. You will not believe. Martin Luther King was accused consistently by the CIA and FBI of being a communist and of being in payroll of the communists. And that made his life hard. Patrice Lumumba was accused of being a Soviet spy No. Both of them, like Jaramogi, fought for rights of the people of Africa in big ways, in different ways. I feel this is an important aspect when the truth actually comes and is revealed for you to see where we stand. Second point, because I don't want to bore you, I'd like, if you'd like to join me on an interview Jaramogi gave in 1964 when he's being accused of being unlucky of the communists. And now, you see in a moment, if you can please put this video on. I would like you to listen, especially because of the accusations which were being made at the time. Please. Oh no, please, no, don't go back. Can you put on the video, please? Please listen, because it is important to know about those days could be destroyed from outside. Please listen.
He's been Jomo Kenyatta. He's been described as anti-Western and pro-communist, and I asked him what he had to say about this.
Well, let me say that I think those who think of me like that are very wrong indeed. I only laugh at them because they are short-minded and they don't know what they're doing. Why I appear to be pro-East is because the weight has been so heavily overweighted on the western side, because Kenya has been under British and the Americans' influence here is also very strong. And in order to be neutral, I might appear as if I'm pulling the weight in order to balance it towards the east. And anybody who sees me just arm pulling in order to bring the balance, they tend to think that I go east. But I am, because I must pull towards east in order to bring about the balance. And immediately the balance comes, I can only be proud to tell you that I'm an African nationalist who will always tour what I feel is right for the African people in Kenya and in Africa.
Listen to
I think it's also suggested, reported, that you have a private army and that you've been importing arms for this army. What's your comment on that?
Well, I wish I had it, but at the present moment I'm very sorry that I haven't got it.
Is it true that you have been sending your supporters for guerrilla training in Bulgaria and other communist countries?
Well, not my supporters. We have been sending the people who are thirsty for education from this country to go to all this country to search for education in any field, not one particular field.
Is it your ambition to become president of Kenya?
But that is not for me to judge. Let it be that is it the wish of the people. If it is the wish of the people that I should lead them in any direction, in any way, let them. It will be their own judgment and so on, and not mine.
Mr. Odinga, there's been a lot of feeling in Britain about the deportation of Mr. Beeston of the Daily Telegraph. Can you tell us the reasons for his deportation?
But that is known, and I needn't actually elaborate on it.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the point I'm making is this. Nowhere in that interview did you hear any allegation on Jaramogi, in his own words, about favoring the East. It's about East and West and balancing it. and he says, I'm an African nationalist first and foremost. If you miss that about Jaramogi's life, you'll miss everything. I'm an African nationalist. There is a very strong story, which you ought to remember, about the humiliation him and his generation went through when they were young and working in this country. At one point, when he was at Maseno as a headmaster of the primary school, the Mzungu, who was his boss, tells him, you don't have the brains of my 6-year-old. You black people are sending Mr. Madhu to Legislative Council, but you don't have the brains of my 6-year-old. Jaramogi spends about 3 pages talking about that story. When he says, I'm an African nationalist and I'm fighting for African people, it goes way back. The bitterness, the anger, and the humiliation. Let's not forget that before you get into the propaganda. Second point, I had and wanted you to look at this picture here. This is Cow in 1952, just before the emergency broke out. I want you to look at it because it's not very clear, but Jaramogi is, well, that circle at the corner there. There's Jomo Kenyatta in the middle. Underneath here, at the bottom, is Dedan Kimathi. These photographs puts Jaramogi, Dedan Kimathi in one place, in one day. But history is not as written, giving us that connection between the two and all the others. There is Kubai at the back, there is Jesse Kariuki, there is Chief Koinange, who was arrested after this. We don't know the identities of all these people. Once we digitize this photograph so that you can see the faces more clearly, we will identify who's here. By the way, Jaramogi is in a suit and a tie. This is 1952. So it tells you how much the transitions are taking place. But there's a story in this and a whole lot of other photographs that you can get. Today, Kimathi occupies a larger-than-life place in our nationalism. No guerrilla leader fights without political backup and without the backup of peasants in society. There is a connection here you will not see in the literature so far. We can do the research and bring it to you if we do it right. The other point I wanted to make before I sit down has to do with the legacy of Jaramogi in ways we don't often recognize. I've just mentioned that it was him who delivered the instruments of Kenya's membership to the United Nations in 1964 after independence. Jaramogi also represented Kenya at the founding of the Organization of African Unity in May 1963. The documents accessing membership of Kenya to OAU, that's Jaramogi's legacy. This coat of arms, again, I would like you to look at it because when you look at the jogo and the axe, I ask students, what does it mean? And they say, well, the jogo was from Kanu and the axe is there because this jogo and the axe is a legacy of Jaramogi. In Luo culture, when a young man leaves a Simba and is founding his home, he comes to the what? What does he provide? An axe and a cockerel. This is what you're seeing there. And this is the mind at the onset of our independence of this new house which is being built, which must have an axe and a cockerel. You know, I know, I've been taught by masters of this trade, Luo elders. If the cockerel and the axe are intact, the following morning, the omens are good. Commemorate the scene of why we got our independence. The night before, traditional leaders from all communities went and performed the ritual of starting a new home. And Jaramogi made sure there was an axe and a cockerel. The following morning, they were intact, which means the omens are good. So don't be discouraged as Kenyans. The chicken was there, the axe was there. And the Prime Minister has built
Uganda from Lira, Acholiland. A great nationalist in Uganda, a brilliant politician, a brilliant scholar. Thank you.
Like, comment. See you on the next one.
Omera Dr. Guru, Omera PM Raila, Mama Aida, Mama Margaret Kenyatta, brothers and sisters, Governor James Orengo, my old friend, and Governor Professor Peter Nyong'o, I greet all of you. I have come from Uganda with a strong delegation. There is no time to introduce them to you. We have come to pay tribute. We've come to pay tribute to Jaramogi, Oteramewa, Lawilwen, Oluma. We have come to tribute to him with you. In Uganda, there is great excitement. As we were trekking our way here, we kept receiving messages from people who were wishing us well on this occasion. So PM and Dr. Oburu and the entire family, thank you for organizing this. We thank you. Because of time constraint, I will be very schematic. We grew up in the powerful Dr. Michael Chege just showed us. Built at Kagea, Aguins Kodek, Acheng Oneko, Pio Gama Pinto, Paul Ngei. Later on we would add J.M. Kariuki, Taita Towet. We grew up in the powerful shadow of these nationalists. I, of course, didn't know Jaramogi then. I didn't know him in Kenya. But I was very fortunate I would get to know him in New York as his resident assistant. Jaramogi in the early 80s who traveled to New York because he had an NGO registered with the United Nations. And also come to New York to organize to travel to neighboring countries. And I was therefore his resident assistant in New York and very fortunate to spend a long number of hours with him. I just want to say this. First, Jaramogi could have become a historic president of Kenya. He did not. But he became somebody more important, with an impact more durable, because he led by example, because he led and lived by his conviction. Jaramogi therefore left a powerful legacy for all of us. The second thing I want to say is that I was struck by the virtues, by the attributes that were so self-evident in Jaramogi. His faithfulness to the people, his courage, his sense of duty, his tenacity in the struggle, and very rare, his self-denial, denying of the community. Jaramogi was also, in spite of his suffering for many years, always committed to reconciliation. These are attributes which, in my view, were not accidental. The Luo elders have attributes which are expected of them, as Jodito Pacho, and these attributes of Jaramogi come straight from that tradition. May God bless him for all that. Thirdly, I was struck that Jaramogi, among the African leaders, was a deeply rooted leader, rooted in his own culture, in his tradition, in the history of his people. That is what gave Jaramogi the confidence to be so open and so cosmopolitan and to accept other cultures and tradition and not be threatened by any of that. He made friends all over. You cannot be a great leader in Africa if you are floating in thin air. You have no roots. It's like Okot Bitek's song of Laweno, without that being the authentic voice of his mother, written in the idiom and rhythm and meaning of his own people, it would not have made the impact it did. So in the political arena, Jaramogi was the equivalent. His rootedness made him a more authentic nationalist in Kenya. He made him a more powerful, convincing Pan-Africanist. How I wish that more of our leaders today would have those virtues. Then let me say this. Before Jaramogi, Bobby Marley said and sang, "We cannot sing the Lord's song in a strange land. We cannot sing the Lord's song in the land of not yet Uhuru." Jaramogi particularly provided this dirge, this soul searching, this credo cur, because of the wholesale plunder that some of our leaders are doing to our country. Not corruption. Corruption is a polite word. Wholesale plunder that is taking place. Jaramogi spoke of not yet Uhuru because he was opposed to some of the African leaders manipulating our ethnic diversity and richness to divide our people. Jaramogi never accepted this. Jaramogi said, not yet Uhuru, because he wanted power to be with our people, to elect those that should govern them, and not the string of rigged elections. And Jaramogi said, not yet Uhuru, because he believed in an egalitarian society, a society in which a child from the remotest village in Kenya can become Professor Nyang' Nyong'o. A child from the rural areas and the slum can tomorrow become Dr. Oburu. He believed with all his heart in that, in providing equality of opportunities. So, if we are today celebrating the life and contribution of Jaramogi, are we prepared to be worthy heirs of Jaramogi? Are we, especially address this to the leaders and the intelligentsia, Joma Wangu Yabe, are you prepared to be worthy heirs of Jaramogi's legacy? To fight the fight that he left midway. It is the unfinished business of not yet Uhuru. Are we prepared to accomplish that struggle? To accomplish the unfinished started? Then I'll say what Jaramogi, what Kikuch, Oterawa, Yueki Kuch. La Wirwuri, Weki Kuch. La Wimon. Pien. Wabishobo, what mamegi. Wabishobo, Luen, my child. So, Jaramogi, rest in peace. This mission will be accomplished. Rest in peace.
They will be speaking actually. Apoyo, Erokamano. Asante. Thank you very much. Let me take this opportunity just to introduce the governors who are here and to ask Governor Abdul Swamad Sharif Nasir to say a word or two on their behalf. We have today with us, apart from the First Lady, who is not a governor, my wife, you are in that category. Thank you very much. Just stand up so that they know that I'm not Bolingo. Thank you. Asante. Governor James Orengo of Siaya. Jim. Thank you very much, Jim. Governor Gladys Wanga of Homa Bay, the indomitable lady. Thank you very much. Governor Ochilo Ayako Nyakwar of Migori. Thank you very much. Governor Simba Arati from Kisii. Wapi Simba? Ako hapa? Okay. Governor Abdul Swamad Sharif Nasir, I've introduced you. You will come over. Then we have Governor Gideon Mungaro. Gideon. Yuko wapi? He's not here. Then Governor Wilberforce Chichilo. Was he here? Finally, is Ferdinand Baraza here? Any other governor I've not mentioned? Now, I'm sure when Moses Kuria came, you didn't see him. Mheshimiwa Waziri Moses Kuria, a good friend of mine. Head of Public Service. Kifanya nyokonyoko atamuona basi. Aya. Then I just introduced 3 deputy governors. My deputy governor, Governor Willie. Thank you very much, Matthew. Deputy Governor Joseph Magwanga from Homa Bay. Thank you very much. And Deputy Governor Dr. Joseph Mahiri. Aya. Now I'll ask Elisha Oraro, the Deputy Speaker of Kisumu Assembly. The people in Kisumu Assembly here, Nereo Kombo, Deputy Speaker, Honorable Ken Oko, please. Majority Leader, Honorable Mumbo Wade, Deputy Majority Leader, and Honorable Adunyang, Chief Whip. Asante Adui, and finally, Madam Jennifer Ubonyo, Deputy Chief Whip. Yeah. Now, finally, can I ask, let me just give a chance to Governor, because he's in a hurry, want to catch a plane. Then I'll ask Wandai. Pardon? Pardon? Okay, let me ask Wandai, just a minute.
Let me, on behalf of my colleague members of National Assembly, join the family of Jaramogi in celebrating 30 years since his demise. But let me also say this, who are too young to have interacted with Jaramogi closely, have had the rare opportunity and chance to be mentored by Baba Raila Odinga. And since we have been mentored properly by Baba, by extension, we have been mentored by Jaramogi. And secondly, let us use this occasion to take stock of the gains we have been able to make in the reform journey, and possibly the losses we might have incurred along the way as we march forward. And let me also commit, finally, on behalf of my colleagues, that we are going to remain true to the coast and to walk the journey. Let me just ask you to stand up. As I mention your name, you sit down. But let me start with the national chairman of ODM, the Honorable John Mbadi, who is also nominated MP. We have in our midst, of course, the county leader or MP for Kisumu County, Ruth Odinga. the Honorable Anthony Oluoch of Madare, the Honorable Bensouda of Homa Bay, the Honorable Adipo Kwome of Karachuonyo, the Honorable Martin Ward Chief of Ndiwa, the Honorable Daktari Eva Buyu of Kabondo Eva Obara of Kabondo Kasipul, the Honorable Orero Mwalimu of Kibera, the Honorable Dr. Lilian Gogo of Rangwe, of Raraka, the Honorable Dr. Christine Ombaka of Siaya, the Honorable Tomo Dege of Nyatike, the Honorable now Rosa Buyu of Kisumu, the Honorable Peter Masara of Suna West, Honorable the indomitable lady Mishi Mboko of Likoni, the Honorable Zamzam of Mombasa, the Honorable Fulangege Badi Twalib of Jomvu, Mombasa, the Honorable Dr. James Nyikal of Seme, who is also the chairman of Duol, the Honorable Oku Kaunya of Teso North, the Honorable Odongo Oron, our host and the MP for Kisumu Central. Of course, Oron must be introduced in a special way. I'm also being asked to introduce the Deputy Leader of Minority of the Senate, who is also the Senator for Kitui. He is here representing His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka. The Honorable Enoch Wambua. I don't know if you would come forward quickly as we conclude and introduce. Yes? Of course, Wambua will introduce the senators, including the SG of the party. I also want to acknowledge the presence of all other guests who have come here, including delegations, particularly delegation from Busia County. I saw them here. Haya, karibu Senator Enoch Wambua. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother, my friend, Excellency Raila Amolo Odinga, and the family of our father, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, for hosting us today. Mine will be very brief. Excellency, I come all the way from Ukambani to bring greetings from the people of the lower eastern region. Umepokea salamu zao? I am here, Excellency, to also represent the Wiper Party leader, His Excellency Dr. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, who was unable to join us today because he has been invited to the DRC to witness the swearing in of their president. And I know he is there with our president, President Muigai Kenyatta. What I know for a fact, His Excellency, and I know my brother Moses is here, I know for a fact that the government of William Samoei Ruto was not invited in that swearing in ceremony because they have messed up protocol with our region. Excellency, I will say one thing and I sit down. Sio ni ukweli? Si tumeambiwa mzee yote alikuwa anasema ukweli? Na sisi tuseme tu ukweli pia? Kabisa. So, I have a lot of respect for three people, three leaders in this country. The first person that I truly respect, and that is why I am here on a Saturday, ni huyu mzee Jaramogi Ajuma Oginga Odinga. Because when he had an opportunity to form government and become president of the Republic of Kenya, he passed that opportunity and said, we can never do it for as long as Johnston Jomo Kenyatta is in detention. Lazima atolewe kwanza. I have a lot of respect for is our leader in Azimio, Raila Amolo Odinga. Because in the year 2002, vile aliangalia akaona viongozi, they cannot agree on who will form the government of the Republic of Kenya, he turned and said, Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki. And with those words, this man liberated us from the many, many years of dark rule of KANU. The other man I have a lot of respect for, and that's the man for whom I'm here to bring, who in the year 2013, he shelved his presidential ambitions and stood firmly behind Raila Amolo Odinga. In 2017, he shelved his ambition and stood firmly behind Raila Amolo Odinga. In 2022, he shelved his ambitions and stood firmly behind Raila Amolo Odinga. Those are the three men in this country that I adore and I respect. And I want to say today, without fear of contradiction, that there's Amolo Odinga and Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. The best, I want to introduce the senators that are here and perhaps ask the SG of ODM, the biggest political party in this part of the region, not just in Kenya, East and Central Africa. Just come and say a word as we introduce the rest of the senators who are here. Senator Safadhali Musimame, we introduce you. And every section of the law, we must withdraw our sponsorship from those leaders to watupe nje, we go for fresh elections. Hapa mnasema nini? Eji unasema nini? Hapo ni sawa. Asante sana. I will give the honor of introducing the rest of my colleagues to my brother, my friend, Senator of Nairobi, Edwin Sifuna. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Honorable Wambua. From Homa Bay, to introduce also the Senator for Migori, my brother Eddie Mwokratego Gicheru. Alafu finally, my chairman of the Public Accounts Committee and the Senator for Homa Bay, Honorable Senator Moses Kajwang. Asante sana, Your Excellency. I will say only one thing and sit down. To the family of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, it has been the honor of my life to know this family, to become friends with this family, to walk the political journey with this family, to learn from people who learned directly from Jaramogi himself. Your Excellency, it is not many young people that some of us have gotten in ODM. That I was mentored by Peter Anyang' Nyong'o, who's my predecessor as the Secretary General of the party. I have learned under the feet of James Agri Boborengo. I have learned under the feet of Baba Raila Amolo Odinga himself. I want to say that this family, God bless you as you continue to make the sacrifices that you've made for the liberation of our country and of our people. And as Jaramogi used to be, I honestly do not know any other politician who would, yes, and of requested that also the members of the county assembly from Homa Bay wasimame wawave haya, MCAs wa Mombasa, MCAs wote wasimame tu tafadhali. I might not know all of you, lakini mnajua tunawapenda. MCAs wa Kisumu, adui si walikuwa wamekuintroduce. Asante sana. Nani nimewacha? Mombasa MCAs tafadhali wasimame. Haya, Governor atafanya wa Mombasa. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. In the interest of time, I will hand over to the Governor of Mombasa.
Asante sana, Your Excellency. Kila mmoja ameongea Kiingereza na Kijaluo. Mimi ningeongea Kijaluo, lakini dada yetu mkubwa hapa Magi anaweza kuona sijui naongea nini. Kwa hivyo unipeni nafasi niongee Kiswahili tu. Kwanza, Your Excellency, nataka kutambua wale nilikuja na wao. Tuko na speaker wa Mombasa, Harub Katri yuko hapa. Nilikuja na CC wangu na Chief of Staff, lakini kando na hao tuko na County Assembly members ambao walikuja hapa as an assembly team. There are almost 20 of them here. Kwa hivyo hapa hii leo, Your Excellency, we have enough. Any decision ile utatupatia amri tutafanya hapa tu. Of course, I came with my leaders who come from our area, Honorable Badi, Mishi, and Honorable Zamzam. Your Excellency, yale nataka kuelezea yatakuwa ni mawili, na nina sababu kwa nini nitamalizia na hayo mawili. Kwanza, tuko hapa kuweza kusherekea maisha ya hayati Jaramogi, mzee ambaye kwamba alipopatiwa nafasi akaambiwa chukua mskani wa urais, alikataa, akasema hapawe uhuru katika Kenya ikiwa kuna wengine bado wako ndani, akiwemo ni Kenyatta. Walipochukua nchi akawa naibu wa rais. Kwa mtazamo wake ya kwa fikra za kisiasa na nchi inavyokwenda havilingani na yeye, akatoa uamuzi, mimi ni bora niweze kujiuzulu, lakini niweke saha na kupeana yale mazuri kwa wale walikuwa wanajulikana kama young turks. Wala hakushika wale ambao kwamba ni Wajaluo peke yake, akashika watu ambao kwamba ni chipukizi, wale walioko mbele yetu: Orengo, Profesa Martin Shikuku, Mombasa kulikuwa na Bamaris na wengine wengi, Gitobu Imanyara, wengi kutoka sehemu tofauti ya hii. Matakwa yake nyuma, akaweka matakwa ya Kenya mbele. Mtu aloweza kusema haya ambao kupeana nasaha na kupeana uongozi kwa vijana ambao kwamba walioko chipukizi, ni lazima maisha haya yaweze kusherekewa. Ndio nikasema, Your Excellency, nina mawili ambao nitaweza kuyataja hapa. Moja, sitaomba ruhusa ya familia. La pili, nitaomba ruhusa ya familia ya Jaramogi. La kwanza, Your Excellency, tupe nafasi tukitoka hapa. Tuna barabara katika Mombasa. Kama gavana wa Mombasa naelezea na natoa amri, kuna barabara katika kaunti ya Mombasa itakuwa na jina la Jaramogi Odinga, iwe katika kumbukumbu ya historia. La pili, Your Excellency, hili nitaomba ruhusa ya familia waweze kukubali. Jaramogi alikuwa si kiongozi wa Wajaluo, alikuwa ni kiongozi wa Kenya nzima. Aliweza kuinua Kenya nzima. Ikiwa leo tuko hapa kumbukumbu ya miaka 30, mwaka wa 31, Your Excellency, kwa moyo mkunjufu, kwa niaba ya watu wa Mombasa na watu wa Kenya, naomba sherehe kama hizi mutupe nafasi kama kaunti ya Mombasa tuweze kuziweka kumbukumbu ya mwaka wa 31, ili mwaka wa 32 nina imani ya kwa kaunti zote 47 zimeweza kupata athari bora ya huyu ambaye kwako wewe alikuwa ni baba wa kukuzaa, kwa Kenya nzima alikuwa ni baba wa demokrasia na alileta yale mengi. Na tusipoweza kuwajulisha wale ambao ni vijana kuwa pamoja wiki nzima hii. Asanteni sana, na kama wanavyosema kwangu mimi Kisumu ni Kisumu dala. Asanteni sana.
Asante sana, Governor. Travel well to Mombasa. Thank you very much. Thank you for the good advice you've given us. Now, of the people speaking us on Zoom, before they do, can I ask Mheshimiwa Moses Kuria, Waziri Moses Kuria, please come over and at least say one or two things to the audience. I know I welcome you to Kisumu, and I'm not going to let you go back to Nairobi today.
Familia ya Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Baba Raila Amolo Odinga, Youth Leader ndugu yangu Oburu Odinga, Mama Aida Odinga, Mama Margaret Kenyatta na watu wa Kisumu, Nyadhuru Auntie, Nyadhuru Umor. Nimekuja hapa hii sherehe ya miaka 30 for one of my early mentors as a student leader in the University of Nairobi. I met Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, and I remember we were accompanied tulipelekwa kwa Jaramogi na chairman wetu wakati huo Mheshimiwa TJ Kajwang, who is here. Pia tulikuwa with our Secretary General Governor Ochilo Yako, who is here today. Na wakati huo Moi alikuwa amekataa kuregister chama chetu cha wanafunzi cha SONU, na Jaramogi tulipoenda kumuona akatusukuma mpaka hiyo chama yetu ikakuwa registered. I remember one time TJ Kajwang and myself went to see the then Attorney General Amos Wako, who was here today. And Amos Wako told me, young man, I understand your position, but my hands are tied. And he could not do anything about it. So Amos Wako, I don't know whether he's still around, he was trying to convince us, just accept to be expelled. Mkubali tu mfukuzwe katika university. Wakati tulifukuzwa kutoka university, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga akapiga simu, akatafuta mtu anaitwa Gerard Otieno Kajwang na akamuamurisha aende mpaka at 6 p.m. And that's how I managed to finish my university, courtesy of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Kabisa. Later, when Jaramogi died, I remember we went to Bondo. We went to Bondo to bury his family during the first Teroburu, when we went to Kangoka Jaramogi. And Moi said that there is not going to be live music. Nakumbuka ilikuwa saa 1 jioni. DC wakati huo alikuwa anaitwa Kirito wa Mai, akatupa tear gas usiku. Nakumbuka tukipitia pahali kuna cactus huko Kangoka Jaramogi, tukiwa na Oburu in a very small hall. So therefore, I come here today to celebrate a legend and to celebrate a part of Kenyan history that shall never be taken away. The challenge we have as we honor Jaramogi today is to be that generation that can make a difference. I believe deep down in my heart that we can live and relaunch Jaramogi and others lived. It may not be from a monolithic thinking as it was when Jaramogi and Kenyatta teamed up. It may not be from the same political party, but we can have an agreement on things that we can never have a dispute about. We can agree on a set of ideals that brings Kenya together. May God rest Jaramogi Oginga Odinga in eternal peace. Asante sana.
Asante sana, Waziri Moses Kuria. Can we have order in the house, please? Tafadhali. Asante sana. Asanteni sana. Now we are going to have presentations from abroad from 4 scholars in Great Britain and the US who have studied Kenya very well, as many of us do. So I'm going to request them to take 5 minutes each. I hope the electronics is ready for me to call Professor David Throop of George Washington University. He will be followed by Professor John Lonsdale of Cambridge University. And then our brother John Kamau, who is a well-known journalist in Kenya, but currently is doing his postgraduate studies in Toronto writes very good articles in the papers, well researched and from archives and so on. And finally, from Professor Robert Mason of West Virginia University. So first,
gentlemen, I only met Jaramogi once when he was campaigning to honor him today. I think you can divide his career into 6 phases.
See you on the next.
First, the period of his education at Messina, the Alliance High School, Makerere, and then back to teach at Messina. And that period demonstrated, I think, his willingness to stand up and challenge authority in 2 famous confrontations with Carrie Francis. First as a pupil at Messina, and then just before he went to Makerere over Carrie Francis's appointment as the new headmaster of the Alliance High School. Until he was elected to the Legislative Council in 1957, when he revived, along with Walter Odede and Achieng Oneko, the Luo Union, and played a pivotal role in the formation of LUTATCO, the Luo Thrift and Trading Corporation. And it was during these years, 1945 to 1957, that he really captured the influence over the Luo community. First, and perhaps most importantly, as the spokesman of the Luo peasantry. It was his critique of soil conservation measures and stocking and cattle dipping, I think, in the 1940s and 1950s, defending traditional peasant principles that catapulted him into the position of Ger and leader of the Luo community, a position that in many respects he was to hold until his death in 1994. The third phase, and the one that we all know about, but which I'm going to the Legislative Council in 1957 until he resigns as Vice President of KANU and Vice President of Kenya to form the Kenya People's Union in 1966. 1958, as has been mentioned, is nationalist movement, is Jomo Kenyatta, and the rest of us sitting here in the Legislative Council are really merely his representatives. And Kenyatta has to be released to play his rightful role in Kenyan politics. But that relationship became tested. And as early as January 1964, it was already evident at the time of the Lynette coup in the KAR that Kenyatta had become a little bit more suspicious of Oginga, of the Jaramogi. And that concern, that suspicion, grew at the end of the year on Jamhuri Day, December 1964, when Kenyan African Democratic Union disbanded, was incorporated into KANU, and changed the balance of ideology. Took Jomo Kenyatta to open the Lumumba Institute, which was to be a training school for KANU officials. And in May 1965, on the graduation of the first class from the Lumumba Institute, they made the mistake, a fatal mistake, I think, looking back, to seize control of KANU headquarters, to proclaim that the leadership of KANU, apart from Kenyatta and Odinga, had all been dismissed, and to usher in a left-wing platform. That event, May 1965, marked in many ways the end of Jaramogi's personal relationship with President Kenyatta. At the same time, of course, you have the rumors about the Russian ship providing weapons and supplies being shadowed by the Royal Navy, and coming into the port of Mombasa to African socialism. And it being quite clear that African socialism in Kenya represented something very different from Africans and the Arusha Declaration and Ujamaa in Tanzania. It was much more friendly to capitalism. It marked, if you like, the culmination of the final blow to the Jaramogi standing in 1965. 1965 saw the publication of a story, revolution document in Kenya, in the Daily Telegraph, which had allegedly been issued by something called